Hi, Amos here with iFi's iEMatch. Now, what is this? So, if you're not familiar with how IEMs work, as you start to get into more expensive IEMs, you get people telling you, oh, you must have, a player or amplifier with zero output impedance, and you must have, there's issues about hiss and multiple balanced armatures and all sorts of stuff like that. The idea of this particular device solves a number of problems that you do encounter when you're dealing with expensive IEMs. Now, inside is, well, apart from some instructions, is basically, it looks like this. Not a very particularly exciting thing, but if you have something, I'm going to use for my example this pair of ALO Audio Andrometers, which has two of the main issues that you encounter with IEMs. Now, the first of those is that they are very sensitive. Now, by that means that it doesn't require a lot of power to drive them. So the downside to that is that they pick up hiss in electronics very, very easily. So if you think about, if you ever stuck your head up close to a stereo speaker in your stereo system, you might notice a tiny bit of hiss, but sitting way back in your chair, you probably don't notice it. Now with IEMs sticking essentially a tiny, very tiny speaker directly into your ear, you're going to notice some hiss depending on the device you're using. Now, the one way of getting around that is some devices like a Hibe's R6, which I reviewed recently, they use a higher output impedance. Now the problem with doing that is with these kinds of IEMs, these IEMs use multiple drivers and multiple balanced armature drivers. The problem with that is the impedance of these drivers in, say, the low range and the high range is different. So if the output impedance of the device is higher than zero, a lot higher, then you can get a change in frequency response. And the most common one with the Andrometers is you get a drop-off in bass. So for example, if I use my old iPhone 6, I get a significant drop-off in bass with these. If I use the Hibe R6, there's a bit of a drop-off, but it's not too significant. But it can be a lot of trouble with some IEMs, kind of sounding odd using something with a high output impedance. So you kind of have to, the R6 was kind of trading off one thing for another. And of course, in the odd situation where you want to use like a big desktop amp designed for full-sized headphones, and you might want to plug in some IEMs from time to time, well, then some of them aren't very compatible. Anyhow, what this does is it essentially puts an inline resistor inside that's got two different options. If I flick this around facing you, it's got two different, if you can just see them set on there, there's a tiny high option here. I don't know if the camera's going to focus correctly, and then there's an ultra option. So essentially what this does, let's say I plug it in, let's say I want to plug these Andrometers into my big Studio 6 amp. That's a big tube amp designed for full-sized headphones. If I plug it in, I immediately get a lot of hiss, like enough that you can hear it while playing music. And that's kind of not ideal. It's also not ideal that I get almost zero volume control. If I turn it up even a tiny bit, I get, the volume gets really loud really fast. So plugging this in and setting it on the high mode, the hiss drops down to the kind of level you get at, maybe out of most devices, a tiny bit essentially. Once you play music, it essentially disappears. Now, and this sets the output impedance to less than 2.5 ohms according to the instructions. The ultra mode sets it to less than 1 ohm. And that means it drops the hiss completely out on my Studio 6. Well, maybe at least low enough that I can't make it out at all. And that makes these compatible with something as unexpected as the Studio 6, and it gives me more volume control. And the problem with this is that it does attenuate the volume, so it does lower the amount of volume you get. So if you do have something that's you're already turning up pretty high, and then you plug this in, and you don't have any other gain options, then you're going to kind of lose the amount of maximum volume you have. So that's the only real disadvantage. But generally with IEMs like these, which do have that issue, they're already very sensitive anyway, so there's usually plenty of volume control left. Anyhow, that's basically how it works, and it does the job as advertised. It comes in this is the balanced 2.5mm version. It does come in a 3.5mm version, and I don't know, maybe they'll make others. The interesting thing in the box was they comes with some minus 37 dB foam earplugs, which is unexpected, and a little thank you thing down here, if you can see that. It doesn't reflect in the light, and a funky little bag to put everything in. Thus. So, that's another quick review from me. That's the iFi's iEMatch. And it's actually built into a lot of their products. Now, I got this alongside the Pro iCam, which I should be reviewing at some point. And so iFi wanted me to give it a go, and so they sent me one along. And I think I'll just leave this plugged into my Studio 6 for the time that I do test IEMs, because it's much less hassle than trying to find a DAP and find which doesn't have a flat battery when I want to test IEMs. So that's actually going to come in handy, and you'll probably see that in future reviews as well. Anyway, thanks once again for watching, and do check out the website here.reviews. If you do want to, these reviews do cost me money to make, so if you can, consider buying your IEMs and headphones from the links in the sidebar on my site, or if you really feel a bit generous, maybe drop me $1 a month via my Patreon. Otherwise, I'll see you online.